where it will be and what's gonna be taking place on those hours. Is there any, are you here?
Good evening. As you said, St. James Missionary Baptist Church is requesting a temporary road closure from George County Extension to Lee Street. And what I did was I drawn up a map of the detour signs. If you wanna look at this map I drew up, you can.
Yeah, we got all, we got.
Yeah.
We got it. She's bring it up.
Mr. Chair, we've all had a chance to look at it, I move that we grant the request.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion second to grant the request for the temporary closure, for St. James Church. All those in favor? Aye. Same sign, opposed. Ayes have it, 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Flood.
Okay. And,
David, I forgot his name.
Could I just get that date and time again so I can notify communication and
yeah,
thank you.
let's see.
August 3rd.
It's gonna be
August 3rd.
August 3rd.
August 3rd from 11 to 3:30.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. All right, moving, on through the agenda. Approval of revision for the SHIP, local housing assistance plan, which, you have in your packets also, had time to review that. And we have a gentleman here to speak for it.
Yep, my name is Matt Pearson. I'm the director of the Swin River Economic Council over in Live Oak, and we've been helping you guys out with the SHIP program since, I guess, the early to mid-90s, and we feel like it's a good working relationship. We had an issue a couple of years ago, it's been going on really for the past 6 or 7 years, where our waiting list for services to be held by the SHIP program, the waiting list has become about 65 to 70 names, and it's taken a long time to get through that process. So we come to the board a couple of years ago and asked permission for you guys to modify your local housing assistance plan, and by doing that, we made a couple of rules. One being, you can only be served one time in your lifetime under the SHIP program. And so by doing that, that kind of eliminated a whole bunch of that SHIP waiting list, and now we've kind of gotten where we're kind of ready to reset. And so the main point of this resolution is to go back in and modify that SHIP local housing assistance plan to allow individuals who are eligible in Madison County to be eligible for the SHIP program twice in their lifetime now. So therefore, if they had service, say, 10, 12, 15 years ago, or even 10 years ago, and needed some more work done to their house, now they have the opportunity to come back in and reapply for services on their home. So that's the main purpose that we're here. And then while we're here, we're doing a couple other cleanup things. One is to more define how we're going to serve 20% of our SHIP allocation for special needs. And what we're basically doing is we're prioritizing those who have special needs. So we're, state of Florida requires 20% of the allocation be spent on families with special needs here in Madison County and across the state of Florida. And the third item on the resolution is how we're going through our waiting list, and we have a points priority list. So when clients apply, we know who to serve first, second, and third, etc. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board has. Again, I really appreciate the working relationship that I have with the board here, and I hope you guys can call me whenever you have any questions or concerns.
Any comments, questions from the board?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to approve, the application from SHIP. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Pass 5-0.
I got one question for Matt.
Okay, all right.
Matt, and I know they being open like 2 days a week. Now, what days is them days?
Well, the county office for all of our services in the next few months will become a 5-day-a-week operation and to be open.
Okay.
For the SHIP program, we have an individual that works in 2 or 3, actually 5 different counties, and she has a phone number and she meets with by appointment, but a lot of it's just people having questions, and so we have anybody on our staff to answer general questions, but as far as us meeting with those individuals to verify income, she's normally here 1 day a week. In fact, she'll be here tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning. Okay.
Yeah, but I don't have her phone number well, I may if you need it. But if anybody calls me, I can.
Yeah, I can
certainly
call you and get it later. That's fine.
can get it. But
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have one question also.
Yes.
The weatherization program, is that part of SHIP also?
It is, but it's not. It's supposed to housing programs, but the weatherization comes through Department of Economic Opportunity, actually as a wash through from the federal level, Department of Energy. SHIP program is state dollars. Our agency administers both programs
Okay.
on behalf of Madison County. The weatherization program is dried up to almost no money at all. So the SHIP program is continuing to be funded. You guys may not remember this, but during the, aura, phase in the early years of President Obama, a whole bunch of money got put into weatherization, and our agency was, at one time, held about $18 million for the weatherization program. At one point, over the 10 counties we serve, we were doing 115 to 120 houses a month, weatherizing those houses. So anything, when something really good comes along, sometimes it follows up with a whole bunch of dried up funding streams, and that's what's happened to weatherization. And so those monies don't really exist the way they did a decade ago. So,
Okay.
but yeah, the answer is yes and no. It exists, it's just not very much money in it right now.
As a matter of fact, I had a conversation with a constituent today. They asked about the SHIP program. So it will be open tomorrow?
Our staff person will be at our office tomorrow morning, and we can answer questions.
Okay.
But the way to really get in touch with us is to contact us via telephone. And we don't have at this point a set time that she is there every single, for example, Thursday morning. So what we do is normally meet by appointment. And then, because there's so many needs out there of what the clients actually need to get from, hey, I'm interested in buying a SHIP house, or hey, I need a new roof on my house. There's a lot of steps that go along, and so it's just not cost effective or time effective for us to sit there and answer those questions, when really we can do it by telephone. And then we get down to people really having the opportunity for us to serve them, then we'll meet with them in person.
Okay.
So,
But you know what time she'll be there in the morning?
I would assume around 9 a.m.
Around 9, okay. All right, thank you.
I just wanna, add, Matt, that I appreciate the fact that they are doing this, twice now. I've worked in social services myself for 30 years and referred a lot of people to the SHIP program over time, and I see the need, or have seen the need, I should say.
Right.
And I think this is a very good step to move forward. Thank you.
Good deal. Well, this plan that you guys are approving today is always able to be adjusted. So it's a 3-year plan, but it can be adjusted, there'll be a resolution as often as the county feels the need to do so. And so that's really a nice working relationship. Hey, we got too many people on the waiting list. Let's constrict the flow of SHIP dollars temporarily and then open it back up. So it's really a good opportunity and good to see. Thank you, board members, for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
All right, we're gonna move on down to item number 7, presentation of payments in lieu of taxes for the, check from the Swanee River Water Management, and y'all have a new packet in front of you presented to you tonight. We have it on the screen too.
Hi, I am Katie Kelly. I am the Legislative and Governmental Affairs Chief for the district. I also have with me Dr. Amy Brown. And if it's okay with you guys, our Executive Director, Hugh Thomas, was unable to make it tonight. So we're gonna kind of tag team this brief presentation. I'm gonna cover the general stuff, and then she'll cover our Western Region Water Supply Planning portion. As you can see on this slide, the district covers about 7,600 square miles, which includes all or part of 15 counties in north central Florida. We have about 13 river basins and a population of 340,000. 4 areas of responsibility that we are charged with by the legislature is water supply, water quality, flood protection, and natural systems restoration. On this slide, you will see our major initiatives that we're working on as a district. I'm sure several of you in this room and the commission are familiar with our regional initiatives valuing environmental resources grant program, or friendly known as RIVER. We also have an agricultural cost share program. We work with staff and state stakeholders for minimum flows and level establishment. We also help with the Springs Grant Program. I know a lot of you are probably familiar that the legislature provides Springs funding to the state, and then we help craft projects with the local entities to provide back to the state for approval. We also work with the state for water quality initiatives. That includes septic to sewer and advanced ag technology programs. And as I mentioned that, Dr. Brown's gonna talk about, we do have a Western Region Water Supply Plan to share with you. On this next slide, you'll see projects. As I mentioned, the river program is one that has several projects within it. We do have a Springs project, which is the Madison Blue Springs Aquifer Recharge. And we do have one ag cost share program, or grant that has about 15 producers. It saves 2.5 million gallons per day and reduces about 100,000 pounds of nitrate. The next slide, and this will be the last one for myself, is our FEMA flood map. The district works with FEMA to do flood assessments for insurance, and so our staff diligently goes around our district and does those assessments and returns them to FEMA. Madison is within the Withlacoochee Basin for the flood assessment. The FY14 grant is scheduled to be completed later this year, and the FY20 grant has not been started, but it does have a projected date to be wrapped up around 2024. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Brown.
Thanks, Katie. So my name is Amy Brown, and I'm the Water Supply Office Chief for the Swanee River Water Management District. I know I spoke to you earlier this year, so this is just gonna be a brief update to bring you up to speed on where we are right now. So water supply planning is tasked with ensuring that there's sufficient water to meet projected future demands, and then also to sustain natural systems. Last year, we approved a water supply assessment at the July governing board for the Swanee River Water Management District, and that had a series of recommendations. So the map slide is still available. So the first one was to split the district into two groups to do planning. That's because the eastern part of our district, we already plan jointly with the St. Johns River Water Management District, so we're already doing active water supply planning in that portion of the district. So the recommendation would be to allow us to focus on the western area separate from that, because we're not gonna be doing that jointly with the St. Johns District like we do in the east. In addition, there's a hatched portion of the western district, which is the groundwater and surface water contribution area to the Swanee River system, and then all of Levy County. And in that area, that's the area where regional planning was recommended. So in July of last year, that was just the recommendation to initiate planning. And so the first step that we've done in terms of the initiation of planning was to go through and work on the 2015 numbers that I workshopped with you previously, and we finalized those. But we will be engaging with the counties and the cities in this western portion of the district as we work on that Western Regional Water Supply Plan, and that would include projected growth and then also projects as appropriate to make sure we have sufficient water to meet projected demands and sustain natural systems. So this is the finalized groundwater use estimates. I showed you the draft numbers, and they've only changed slightly for the Swanee River Water Management District as a whole. So it's about 250 million gallons per day district-wide, with most of that water use coming from agriculture, and then we also have a couple of large industrial users. The city of Madison County has a smaller industrial use, but most of the groundwater use in our district is agricultural. So we go to the next slide. So this is for the Madison County specifically. It's about 24 million gallons per day, with about 20 of that being estimated from agricultural irrigation, and then another 0.75 that would be livestock irrigation. So much of the groundwater use in this area is agriculture. And on the right-hand side of this same slide, that is taken from the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services projections for agricultural growth. And that's something that I showed with you previously. But that's showing about, what they're saying is from the year 2016 out, looking out 20 years based on economics and the estimates that they have, they're estimating about 6,000 new irrigated acres for the county of Madison, just based on the demands that are in place. And what that would be is, it wouldn't necessarily be new agricultural lands, it would be the conversion of agriculture to more irrigation. So existing agricultural lands would be more intensely irrigated. And I do have additionally, if people want additional information, I'm certainly happy to share that. But based on that, the recommendation will go to the July Swanee River Water Management District Governing Board to designate that hatched area that we saw on the map as a water resource caution area. What that means is, we're gonna be doing regional water supply planning in that area. DEP requires that within 1 year of the determination that a regional plan is recommended, that it be designated as a water resource caution area. What that triggers is a reuse feasibility assessment. So all the wastewater treatment facilities that are within that hatched area on the western part of the district would need to do a reuse feasibility analysis. Now, in the case of the city of Madison and all of the other cities that are in that hatched area, because they're applying their reclaimed water to a spray field that's in a recharge area, they're already 100% meeting that reuse requirement. But as we move forward, if there is the possibility to more beneficially use that water, that would be something that we would be looking at on the project list and get prioritized for funding. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions, or I can bring Katie up to give you the check.
Which one do you really want?
Alright, I feel like Vanna White, and I'm supposed to like do something. So we do have your payment in lieu of taxes check that you guys receive annually. It's for $19,935.12. So I will be happy to give this to you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Pass this over to our CFO.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move on down to the next item, which is item number 8. Review and possible approval for the tennis courts, and recreational complex. You have the 4 bids that were submitted. In your packet, you have also a spreadsheet that, just pleased myself, but they're showing, the different ones and what the prices were that were submitted. I did note that, I think the Nitty Sports Construction from Longwood, Florida was the low bid. That was with the bid price, and they did not submit a bid on the lighting, and, so, any other comments, y'all wanna go over the sheet? There's, share your sheet with you, just a minute. You have, also bid from Premier Service Solutions and McGrath, and also CM Brandy's local, contractor. The other bids that you noticed were also submitted with lighting, numbers. And Mr. Kaufman, you wanna address what?
Yes, sir. I think also, you received an email,
Yep.
from Ms. Judy, and,
Right.
and that was a recommendation from the committee, tennis court committee.
Right.
And Judy, did you wanna speak to that?
Sure.
Judy White, Tennis Court Committee and Pickleball. The committee does recommend that the board approve the tennis court low bid of Nitty Sports Construction of $87,700. We also ask for the opportunity for the committee to be able to work with Nitty to obtain a quality lighting system that fits within the original budget.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
if
Mr.
motion is in order, I move that we go with the committee.
Second.
All right, motion to second to approve Nitty Sports Construction at the, bid price of $87,700, and, would that include, your motion include working with them for lighting, or would?
Yes, and I have another question also.
Yeah.
I guess we would have to do the lighting on a separate bid, is that my understanding? You have to bid that again, is that a process?
Not necessarily.
Okay,
One of our committee members, Jeff Brewer, is the electrical engineer with Tri-County. He would be agreeable to heading up that project. We would, of course, let you all know what we have found. As far as a lighting company, I've already been working on that.
okay.
And I feel like, and he feels like that, the amount, which is $42,100 less for lighting, we would like to be able to pursue that, in order to do it all at the same time. From all that I've learned, it's much, less expensive to do it all at the same time than to try to do it later. So we're asking that you allow us to pursue that.
Yes.
There's an option 2, the 3-inch asphalt, so we're not doing that?
We're not doing
No,
that.
we're doing the 1.5.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's fine if the board wishes to do that. I think what you're saying is to, approve the bid of $87,700 from Nitty for just the construction of the courts, and that all of the other bids for lighting exceed the budget for lighting, and so the tennis committee is gonna come back with a recommendation to the board on how to handle lighting.
Right.
Does that sound right?
That sounds good.
And of course, the tennis committee's free to work with Nitty or anybody else they want to on what you're gonna do for lighting.
Right, and from what I've been told from speaking to the tennis court companies, it's better to do it all at the same time.
Sure.
Much cheaper.
Yeah.
Any expense on the lighting that will be paid would have to come back to us, correct?
Anything above the 87.7 would have to come back, and the only thing to be careful of course, is yeah, you do wanna do it all at the same time, but now Nitty doesn't have to honor this bid forever, so you gotta kinda move
Right,
quickly
right,
to figure out
right.
what we're gonna do.
Absolutely.
Okay, any further discussion, questions? I have a motion and a second to approve the Nitty, construction bid of $87,700. All those in favor say aye, please. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. White, appreciate it very much.
And thank you all my people
And,
to come.
I'm quite sure we'll get the lighting straightened out
Thank you.
in due time, okay? All right, moving on down to, we have consideration proposal for Johnson and Blanton to provide consulting services for Madison County. I'll turn that over to, Mr. Kaufman, if you would like to address that.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. This is related to, discussion that we had a couple meetings ago about the toll roads, that the governor just signed, into law. And looking at opportunities of trying to maybe bring that into Madison County. It's up in the air right now of where that's actually gonna go. And so we were thinking about, employing the services of, Johnson and Blanton, to help us, in looking at that road. So Derek is here tonight. Derek, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Come on up and introduce yourself.
And Ed, Dean is in the background there. Ed.
I can never be in the background, I'm too big for that.
Well, you've had time working with them, so we'd like to.
I will, soon as he we can't fit at the same podium at the same time.
Mr. Chair, thank you so much for letting me be here. My name is Derek McGee, as mentioned, and Brian, thank you so much for allowing me to be here. So I work for a firm called Johnson and Blanton in Tallahassee, and we provide statewide lobby representation. And in regards to being here, so our firm has been in existence since 1994. John Johnson, who is the original founder and still the managing partner of our firm, I joined the firm almost 5 years ago. Prior to that, I did 13 years in state government, starting under Governor Bush, including under Governor Scott. And so my background and focus is a lot on economic development and transportation, K-12 education, and then criminal justice, mainly in the reentry arena. And so prior to joining Governor Scott's office, leaving Governor Scott's office, I was his director of legislative affairs, so I handled all of his public policy and budget. But prior to that, I served as the chief of staff and interim director of the Department of Economic Opportunity. So I've done many years in economic development, and again, many years in state government. And one thing you learn in state government is you don't burn bridges, because it's all cyclical. And so I've been fortunate to just complete my 18th session before the legislature. And in regards to the legislation at hand, Senate Bill 7068, it was not a bill that I personally introduced, but I was monitoring and working on it on behalf of a few other parties and working with the Department of Transportation. And so this was the #1 priority of Senate President Bill Galvano, to create 3 multi-purpose corridors. The one as relates to this area is the Suncoast Corridor, which is supposed to be from Citrus County to Jefferson County. And the way in which it's set up is there's 3 multi-purpose corridors the law requires, and the work has to begin by December 31st of 2022 and conclude by December 31st of 2030. So that's 8 years to complete 3 corridors simultaneously. There are monies that have been set aside in that regard, but also what it lays out is each corridor has to create a task force. And that task force consists of state agency personnel, but also each county that would be impacted by that corridor has to have a seat on there. So Madison County would have a seat on that task force. The law also requires that any impacted county would be required to host a public meeting. So Madison County will be allowed to have a public meeting where the community of Madison County can come in and speak to any concerns, any support for the corridor. There have been, according to DOT conversations I've had with them at high levels, there have been some pushback already been received by Citrus County. They got some by Jefferson County where they've been balking at not wanting it. I will tell you that this is a great opportunity for economic development, a great opportunity for many other things that could take place. Again, this is a very aggressive agenda. You're talking about 8 years and upwards of $2.5 million of work that's being done. The law again mentions that it'll be open for traffic by December 31st of 2030. So a lot taking place. And I believe that Madison County is positioned well. Having worked in the governor's office and maintained relationships, I still have connections now with this current administration. I've had at least 1 or 2 conversations with them, a high level, kind of just mentioning, asking the question of if another county that was near Jefferson County had interest in being the recipient of where it ended, would they be amenable to that? They're committed to seeing this to the end. And if Jefferson County is not willing to have it, there's one very close to Jefferson County, i.e. Madison, for example, they would entertain that. And that could either be done through amending of the legislation or getting close enough to Jefferson County where nobody would balk at the intent of the law not being fulfilled. I am very comfortable and confident that if Madison County were to proceed with wanting to have those conversations, what I'll propose to the room is our firm is duly qualified to help in that regard. On the back end, I would recommend that they need, more likely Brian coming to Tallahassee, but having some meetings with the Secretary of DOT, meetings with the Governor's Office. Secretary, I forgot to mention that he has final say on who gets appointed to the task force. All appointments have to be done by August 1st of this year. I talked to DOT and I asked them how it would play out. What they're gonna do is they're really gonna ask the impacted counties to recommend someone to represent their county. And I would say that I think, you know, the county administrator would serve well in that regard. But the most important thing is it has to be someone who has the confidence of their county, represent the county well, can also relate back to the county what's going on. It's a very aggressive assignment for the task force. But the seats on there are very, very important because the ultimate goal is to make sure that Florida benefits from this. Studies have been done, there's a major impact happening on I-10 and I-75 and US 19. And so Senate President's legacy was to be able to allow for more infrastructure. Florida is now the third largest state as we know, and our infrastructure has not kept up. And so that was the vision behind this. And Mr. Chair, I'm honored to be here, happy to take any questions. I'll defer to Ed if that's how your order is, and I'll be here to answer any questions that you see fit, sir.
Come forward.
Good evening. Before I let you answer any questions, I want to kind of give you a little bit more testimony on to the Derek who he is and actually how I came to know him. One of the things that I think that he omitted from his background is he's indeed a lobbyist by trade from 9 to 5, if you will, but he's also the senior pastor of his own church in Tallahassee. The Bible-based, is it Methodist or? Bible-based church. Okay, it's a Bible-based church. It's a fledgling church in Tallahassee, and in fact, there's several people that I went to school with back in the early '90s that have sung his praises. Interesting enough, last year, how I met Derek initially was I had gone to Commissioner Moore, and I had asked him about retaining a lobbyist for Greenville to get us what we would call in DC plus up, basically some appropriation money. And at the time, Commissioner Moore turned me over to Chris Doolin, who many of you are familiar with. Well, Chris kind of more or less punted on the idea because quite frankly, we couldn't pay him, I guess, what he was worth to do individual lobbying. A lot of times people get confused with when you have a consortium lobbyist that consortium lobbyist does lobbying for individual tailored issues like this issue here. It just doesn't happen. And a lot of times those consortium lobbyists are actually afraid to tell you this. And so Chris and I had good conversations because for those of you who do not know, my background, I was a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. for almost 20 years. And so this is kind of my bailiwick in my area. And so he turned me on to Derek. And in a nutshell, his firm basically commenced to doing a lot of pro bono work for Greenville. We were very successful in those efforts. So one of the things that y'all just recently heard about was about the Springs program. Well, Derek made sure that I had kind of unfettered access, and it landed Greenville about $2.7 million from the Springs grant, and that's for phase one. Phase two that we go back for and ask for this year is another 1.5, which will bring us up to $4.2 million. So his bona fides are solidified in my eyes. And so, to be quite frank with you, many of you have heard or seen in the newspaper about some of the things that Greenville has done. Well, I wanted the county to be able to share in some of the things that we're doing down here by giving you access to someone who's helped me to kind of go through this process. I felt like it was only fair, basically, because when I call him, he returns my telephone calls, and we're not paying. And that's just something that's a little bit avant-garde to the industry. And basically, he told me, he says, hey, look, I know that you're serving the poor and the fatherless down there, and I know that you need help, I'll help you. And so, therefore, I want to make sure that I let this board know that you have someone that's extremely reputable, that's well-known throughout the industry. He's worked in several Republican administrations, and so his credentials are solidified. So he comes very highly regarded from your town manager in Greenville. So I'll be willing to answer any questions as well as Derek can answer any questions at this time.
Anyone have any questions, Derek, or Ed?
Well, Mr. Chair, just building on the comments that were made about the growth of our state and the proposed highway, at this point, we don't know what direction is coming. But I feel that Madison County will be able to benefit from that new highway. We were all on I-75 not too long ago, and we saw how the traffic was there. Ridiculous. But long story short, I think it would be to our advantage to engage an agreement with Mr. McGee and his firm to help us to get a seat at the table. And as he said earlier, things are moving fast, and we've got, 2 engineers on staff that could help us. If we can get a leg, a spur, if you will, or even the highway itself to come towards Madison County, I think would be to our advantage.
Well, thank you, and I want to echo that remark. I think the highway's coming. There's no doubt about it. The governor has already approved it, three legs. This particular one, if I understand correctly, is gonna take the turnpike basically northwest of where it comes into 75 there at Wildwood now, and if any, as Commissioner Moore said, I was there last week, all of us were. 75 is congested like a parking lot most days from Wildwood to Ocala and practically to Gainesville, and I think they have a major wreck there at least every 24 hours. I think it's obvious that it's gonna come. I think it would be an economic benefit for us. And also, if you look at the map and study it, I think it's a no-brainer that if they came through Madison, they could intersect with 75, which is the goal. It's interesting, I have a very good friend who's a senator in Clydesville. Georgia doesn't know a whole lot about this coastal department, which is interesting, I thought. But it's intended to bring this parkway into North Florida and go into 75 eventually at some point. I think going into Jefferson County, that means it's gonna have to go a long way to get through Thomasville and back up to 75. If it came this way, it would be a whole lot shorter, and it would be a tremendous economic boom, I think, for us. And I don't think there's anybody that would question that, so. And Derek, I appreciate everything you're doing. And I'll, guess a motion would be in order to, consider.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we engage, the firm of, Johnson and Bland to help us get a seat at the table for this project.
I second that, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion and a second to accept.
Sharon, I had a question.
Okay.
when y'all do this, y'all need to tell me where we're gonna get money from, so I'm gonna make a suggestion here. It's got in the contract that they can begin on July first, which would be the most likely thing, which would put 3 months of it in this year. I'm gonna have to pull that money out of your physically constrained reserves. So just so, in the motion, it needs to say that, cause I gotta show the auditors, and then coming up for the following 9 months, we can budget that during budget time.
Yes, let's include that in the
Just wanna make
motion.
sure that's in the motion.
Well, we need to rephrase the motion then to,
If I could suggest, we probably need 2 motions, because,
oh, okay.
let's go ahead and approve the, contract, and then with the second motion would be a budget amendment to authorize payment of the funds due this year out of the,
Physical
constraint. Because when you go to the auditors, you're gonna wanna show them a separate motion.
Sure.
Yeah, good point. Okay, we have a motion and a second then to, employ Johnson and Blanton to provide consulting services for us. All those in favor say aye.
Yeah.
All opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. I will now entertain a second motion for the, budget amendment for the physical constraint.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second to approve the, immediate funding out of physical constraint money for the remainder of the year. Do I have any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? All those opposed, same sign. Pass 5-0.
Mr. Chair, I do have one question. Mr. McGee, when can you give us, or how often can you give us some updates as to what's taking place with the project?
Well, truthfully, I can give it as often as you want me to. My intention would be is to lay out a detailed scope of work in writing and get it to Brian to kind of show you what I propose for 3, 6, 9, 12 months. So you actually will see the work that's being done. A part of that's gonna be setting up meetings in Tallahassee in front of the Secretary of DOT, or at best him, at worst the Chief of Staff, getting to meet with the Governor's office. But my plan is between later than Monday to get a detailed scope of work. And I also propose in there whether we're doing weekly or bi-weekly. I'm very happy to drive over for commission meetings as you all request or instruct. And so I'm very flexible in that regard.
Okay.
But I would definitely provide a very detailed scope of work. You all can kind of see what you've agreed to and please make sure you're okay with that.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I guess my question would be, because we do have, by the statute, have a place at the table.
Yes, sir.
We have someone, we would need to appoint someone to serve on in that capacity. And, I know that we mentioned, there was some discussion possibly our manager doing that. When would we be to designate that individual?
Well, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So the law says August 1st, the Secretary has to make the official appointments. Basically what that means is you release the list publicly to the outside world of here's the task force members of each of the 3 corridors. What I would propose take place is the commission decide who they want to represent the Madison County, and then what I would begin doing is, let's say for example, if it's the county manager, I would begin to make sure DOT's aware this is who we have in mind. When I had a discussion with them at a very high level, they were very clear to me they did not want to find themselves getting involved in a local fight. So they wanted to make sure that they knew. Now their battle is going to be in those areas where the counties have already made it known they're not interested in coming this way. That's where their biggest fight is going to be. For us at Madison County, we actually can be proactive by suggesting whomever is going to be in that regard. And so again, by August 1st, and then I'll just tell you, I think that the best approach would be